about disability inclusion within the workplace is the fact that some organizations look at it as like, okay, I'm not sure if we're ready to hire people with disabilities, right? Be very intentional about that. The ironic part is they already have people with disabilities, whether they know it or not. Businesses right now, if you're not being intentional about understanding disabilities in the workplace, you're missing a significant piece, because we're going to age into disability at some point in time. 2 different administrations at the White House that's come talk about disability inclusion. I got invited by the U.S. Embassy to go deliver 3 keynote presentations in Moscow. And I'm like, I'm just a guy from Kansas who didn't want to do this at all.
So your daughter is rowing and just got her shoulder repaired, but didn't miss one day. So how long was the recovery period?
She was, I want to say August, September. So that's what, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months in. And she was in a boat and didn't miss a race. So
what is the labrum? Is that kind of like the...
Kind of holds everything together. But she had dislocated her shoulder in high school and then dislocated again on July 4th in our pool. She literally was just standing there and went for a surface dive and it popped out. And so Kim, being the PT, both times she was able to put it back in, but the last time she goes, that didn't go in the way it's supposed to. And it went in, but she goes, it just felt odd. Well, what happened was she actually cracked or broke the head of her bone and actually cracked the socket itself. So she has 4 anchors in her shoulder.
Wait, how'd she fracture it?
When it went back in, it broke. So yeah, we don't know if it was if it was going back in and it broke. Most likely because she wasn't having any problems until after that the second dislocation. And so we went in and saw the doctor and got the x-rays, and he's like, yeah, you're a little complicated. But she is so focus driven. She's like, this date I can lift 5 pounds. This date I can lift heavy. This date I can start working on the erg again. This date. And she hit every one of those. I mean, it was just like, did not care. But she went to all the rehab. She did all the things she was supposed to do.
I love it.
Yeah. So she was
oldest?
She is. She's the oldest. She's 20. Yeah,
how many kids do you guys have?
2.
2 girls?
No, 1 boy and 1 girl. So
the boy. I'm sorry, you told me this. The boy, the son. Your son is going to be a firefighter.
Gabe's going to be a firefighter. Yep.
When is he officially going to be done with that?
He'll be done with that in this semester. So he's in the academy now, and after that, as he refers to it, he'll be on a wee-woo truck.
Has he always had an interest in fire trucks more than a...
The interesting thing is I had a heart issue when he was 3 that required me to be hauled out by the paramedics out of our house at 3 o'clock in the morning. And one of the firefighters, Gabe, was standing there with my dad, and Gabe said, I'm praying for you, Dad, at the age of 3. And that made an impression on a firefighter. Well, then a couple of years later, we were at Touch-A-Truck. I don't know if you've done that with your kids, but you can go crawl around on all these apparatuses and trucks and everything. Anyway, we were down in Spring Hill one, and firefighter goes, hey, I know you. And Gabe looked at him and goes, yeah. And he goes, I saw you when you were 3 when I was taking your dad out. And that made an impression on Gabe. And I think that just kind of started a little ember. And then it just kind of grew. And then we did the Bataan Memorial Death March for one of our races. And Gabe went to the medic tent and actually had the opportunity to work with all these doctors and nurses and that sort of stuff. And that's when he caught the bug. And that was 2 years ago. And after that day, he was like, this is what I want to do. I'm not going to college, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, this is what I'm going to do. And it's like, go for it, man.
And it all started with the firefighter remembering him. That's all it takes sometimes.
Yep. And Gabe's big thing is it's not about, he goes, Gabe's first call on a ride along, unfortunately, ended in a death that person had a cardiac arrest. And Gabe saw that and he's like, you know what? You just get back on the truck because sometimes the Lord, your time's your time. But on the other hand, we can go save somebody. But the whole time, Gabe's like, he realized how important, really, in a matter of, how you connect with people. How do you, and he's like, that firefighter connected with me a long time ago. But how do you have customer service? How do you help people get through probably one of the darkest, craziest times of their life in a way that you can not only honor them, but honor the Lord and that sort of stuff? And so it's really it's a passion for him. And so it's super exciting.
I love it. That is great. So then if somebody is going into becoming or being a firefighter, does that also mean they have to have another job too?
Gabe actually he's had his own lawn business now this is year 4. So he's up to 60 yards. So he has his own side gig already. And so it'd be nice. And he's like, it's going to be great during the mowing season. But when it's snowing outside, he's got other gigs that he's going to do. But
that's common.
Yeah.
They usually have another job too.
Yeah. It's usually something that's very different than what they're doing on the job, because like Gabe's like, his zen is being on the back of a mower. He can just totally check out and kind of process things and that sort of stuff. And he's like, if I'm on the back of a mower, I'm fine. And so it's interesting that they firefighters and first responders see the darkest of the dark. And how do you go and process that? And obviously, Gabe's got a great relationship with the Lord, but I think the Lord also allows him to have the other job that he's built over a 4-year period that's going to carry him through. So he'll have dual things to be able to go and do. So
today you are helping companies employ people with special needs. Mm-hmm. How did you get into that?
That is a long story, and I realize this is a limited time.
Let's just start with this question then.
Yep.
Why should a company even think about doing that?
The interesting part about disability inclusion within the workplace is the fact that some organizations look at it as like, okay, I'm not sure if we're ready to hire people with disabilities, right? Be very intentional about that. The ironic part is they already have people with disabilities, whether they know it or not. 1 out of every 4 individuals in the United States right now, based upon the last census, are individuals with disabilities. So you lay that equation over your workforce. There are people, you may not know it, and that's okay, because 17% of all, disabilities, or actually 29% of all disabilities are visible. That's a huge part of disabilities that are invisible. And I think one of the things that the bug, quote unquote, COVID did for us a couple of years ago was kind of unmasked the whole mental health aspect of things and allow people to have a little bit more, I wouldn't say necessarily freedom, but they felt more comfortable disclosing what their conditions might be. So businesses right now, if you're not being intentional about understanding disabilities in the workplace, you're missing a significant piece, because we're going to age into disability at some point in time. We're working longer. We have more challenges. We have different things that are in our lives that may or may not preclude us from actually being able to disclose our disabilities. And that's a big piece. But if people become more comfortable doing so, it's now, okay, I have this thing, and what does that mean? And I think that's a big part of businesses. It's like, okay, so now I understand I do have people with disabilities. If I'm being intentional to make sure that I unlock individuals' opportunities to be their very best, and they might have a barrier that my workplace has or something that might cause them not to be their best, what do I need to do about that? So I think businesses have to, as part of the imperative of business, to say, I need to be sustainable and this needs to be a long-term solution, is to be able to have an idea that people are going to have things. We're going to have stuff, but it doesn't define us. It's like, if I can do the job, let me do the job. And sometimes we find that individuals with disabilities actually do the job better than people without. Some people I know out there, hey, they have superpowers. Well, maybe they just are really dialed in, and you're really hitting what their skill set is. And so I think that's a really important part.
What would be an example of how a company would adjust, adapt, or provide some sort of, different way of doing something, or just an adaptation, I guess.
They can be referred to as adjustments or accommodations
Yeah.
or what have you. The interesting part about it is I always say kind of tweak the lens in which you look at how your work is done. Because the work has to get done. I mean, if you're a business, I have to make a certain amount of widgets. I have to have this type of company performance in order to make money and be sustainable. But how that actually gets done may be very different, And so how, maybe my work processes may be a little bit modified. So, well, you have to be good with customers, and you have to do something that's maybe very tactical and requires a certain amount of tenacity. Just kind of get into it. Well, maybe what's important, is it the customer service, or does that person really have to perform the customer service, or they can actually do this other thing really, really well, and you free up some other people who are more customer oriented. One of the things, I work with a health system, and credentialed employees like nurses. Nurses do not get into nursing to make sure that the linen closets are full and the copy paper, the copier has copy paper. They get in because of the fact that they want to have, impact.
Right.
Well, one of the modifications we've worked with the organization is let's hire somebody who may have a disability, but they're really excited about making sure that the linen closets are full and that the copy paper is full and that sort of stuff. And so what we did was actually carve that off of the nurses so they could actually deal with, be patient focused. And it actually helped everybody, because now you have a different job that may not require 40 hours a week, but you're not asking nurses who are specially trained to do the work that they're supposed to do to go make sure the copier has enough paper in it and the linen closet's full. They get to do patient care, which is what their passion is. And so that can be a modification. It's I'm not saying I'm hiring somebody to do hiring two people to do one person's job, but I'm splitting it up a little bit to where I can actually empower somebody who has patient care credentials to do their job, and let somebody else take care of packing linen closets. Maybe it's only 3 hours a day. Okay, fine, great. The person's going to find fulfillment, but then the nurse is going to be fulfilled as well. So anyway, that's one way of modifying, but there's a whole host of different ways. But again, it's more of how do we look at our work, and can it be done differently than what our usual way of doing things is.
That's a beautiful combination, because I know for my son, who's autistic, if I don't keep him busy and I don't give him a job, guess what he does? He gets into trouble.
Yeah.
And it's almost like he feels a little he has a purpose. And I think that's how we were made. That's by design. We need a purpose. And I think we sometimes will think about this wrongly, that that's beneath somebody, or if you have somebody, for example, at Walmart, the greeter. No, that's too low of a job for that person. According to who?
Right.
Everybody needs to do something.
Yeah.
Whether it be a CEO or taking out the trash.
Yeah.
But if we're doing it for the glory of God, and we're doing it to serve God, it doesn't matter what we're doing.
Right.
But we got to be doing something.
I think one of the slippery slope for employers and hiring managers is to try and put themselves in the position of the person they're trying to hire.
Bingo.
And that's first of all, it's not fair. We're not in that spot. We don't have those life experiences, nor do we actually know what really gets them excited, right? I mean, so I think that there's a part of, can you do the job? And don't get wrapped up into, I don't know how they're going to be able to do that. I don't know how or why they would want to do that. Or to your point, that should be so beneath them.
Right.
It's a job. I mean, I've seen some of the happiest people greeting me at Walmart.
Right.
They're so excited. And I mean, you can't help it. Well, I gotta go to the store. But then you get greeted by somebody who's got a smile on their face, and you're like, okay, this isn't going to be so bad, right?
Exactly. I mean, I think that just goes back to making sure that we are seeing, or trying to do more of the seeing through the perspective of other people, and not from your own lenses. Because that's I think where we get in trouble. I love even Chick-fil-A.
Oh yeah.
Locally, there was one that there was at least 3 people there with special needs.
Yeah.
But they weren't just sitting there. They were working.
Right.
And I think that's such a great thing.
Right. I mean, and the other thing we tell employers is if you ever do this for charity, you're in the wrong, you have the wrong frame of mind for doing it. If you get to the point to where it's like, I just want to go hire people, I want to do something good. Okay. Hire them to do a job because they can do the job. Do not hire them to do a job so you can give them a paycheck. If you hire them because of you're feeling sorry for them or there's a pity or whatever goodwill you're going to feel in your heart at that point in time, that good feeling is going to come back to you 100-fold, completely the opposite, because you're going to realize, wait a second, person's not qualified to do the job. People who I also have hired to do the same job are recognizing the fact the person can't do the job. Sometimes they actually try and pick up the slack, so they're actually working harder. You're probably paying people the same amount of wages. That's just gonna become toxic over time, and so it's like now you have to let the person go when full well you knew you probably shouldn't have hired him or her in the first place. And so, disability inclusion has to be an intentionality, not just something where it's like, well, I just want to be able to check this off for corporate social responsibility to hire somebody because I feel sorry for them or they have a condition. Hire them because they're qualified. And if that person's not qualified, I can promise you that you're going to find somebody who is qualified, who also has barriers to employment. So
I think that is one of the natural responses that people could have is when they hear that word, inclusion, which means, I've got to fill a quota regardless if they can do the job well or not.
Right.
And you're saying that is not the way to go. Whether it be for special needs or disability or really anything.
Anything. Nope. If the individual can do the job, hire them because they can do the job. Can they do the essential functions? Can they make your company better because they're there? The ironic thing is when you hire an individual with disability and they actually can do the work and they're crushing it, what happens to your culture is actually something that you wouldn't even really be able to imagine, because you're going to have customer service oftentimes goes up, and there's metrics that show that. Businesses that support and employ individuals with disabilities are, more favorable in the eyes of the consumer.
Especially a parent who has a special needs son.
Yeah, and almost the 87% of the U.S. population said that they would give their dollar or brand loyalty to organizations they view as disability friendly. So there's that. But then you also find productivity. I mean, these are all things you can find out. I mean, these are true metrics. Productivity goes up because people feel like there's more to work than just coming to work. There's also engagement by the employees, and that's a big thing, obviously, in business now is like employee engagement. Yeah, they get engaged because of the fact, not only the individual with a disability that you've hired because they're qualified, but the people around them find more engagement in their job as well. And so you get engagement that goes up. Your attendance, for individuals with disabilities is usually higher than normal. And if they happen to be out sick, they're coming back as soon as they possibly can, because this is like a second place to them, right? And so I think there's just so many intangibles that we can point to where businesses can thrive by being intentional in disability inclusion. It's a really understated at times impact that you can have on your business.
We employ at least 2 that I know of who are special needs, and these individuals are leading the way with their consistency, like you said, in their attendance and being able to follow a process. It's incredible. And the other thing I have to mention is anytime that I see somebody with a disability doing something amazing, pushing themselves, I look at myself and I think, what excuse do I have? So I think there might be even a motivating factor when you're complaining about some dumb reason that you're not performing at your highest level, and then you see somebody who has an actual physical disability doing amazing, you look at yourself going, okay, I need to step it up now.
Oh, yeah. No, that's for sure. I mean, it's like, it's not, a lot of things out there about, don't be inspired by me or whatever. And I was like, you know what? Okay, I get that. But on the other hand, I'm like you. It's like, what are my excuses? I'm just not feeling it today. Really? That person may not be feeling it either, but they're crushing it, right? So I think it's a really important part.
So what kind of led you to? I know you were at AMC, and that kind of started this whole process. Let's dive a little deeper into that.
Yeah. So had the pleasure of being the director of recruitment for AMC Theaters. I've been in HR probably 12 to 13 years at that point. I got to tell you, disability inclusion was not on my radar at all. There just was, zip. But AMC had started a program called Sensory Friendly Films to where they left the lights on and turned the sound down, which is it's definitely a stark contrast to when I go to the movies. It's like, you turn the lights down and sound's going up, the hair stands on the back of my neck. I'm like, let's go.
And everybody has to be quiet.
Right. And they also, that was a good point, is the fact that they actually threw Silence is Golden out. And so this sensory friendly film, I want to say a phenomenon actually started to take place within AMC. They started in, one theater, and then, suddenly there's like, wait a second, there's a whole host of individuals and families out there who are really buying into this. It wasn't just like, oh, we'll give it a shot. This was about people and families for the first time ever being able to bring their loved ones to a movie theater to see the same movies that their friends are being able to see. Whether they be at school or around the water cooler at work, they can actually talk about the same movies at the same time. And so, yeah, it was a really great, powerful thing. But AMC had partnered with Autism Society of America, won a national award for it. We had a new CEO who was on the job, and he went to D.C. and got inspired. And it's like, what else can we possibly do? We're a big company. And they said, if you can hire people with disability, with autism to work in your theaters and your customers, nobody's doing that. And this is about 15 years ago. Autism was this really a catch-all term at that point in time, which is like, anybody who, we refer to as have neurodiversity, it was all autism. It's just autism, right? It's this big spectrum, and we were talking about how far and broad the spectrum went.
Yep.
But anyway, so I got word that the CEO is interested in hiring people with disabilities. Great. And my whole thing was to do what? And I'm the director of recruitment. We had gone from teenagers and popcorn as their business model to, then we served alcohol, and then we started serving made from scratch food in the theater. So you had to hire bartenders and chefs, and that was all on my team to be able to, it's like, we have this idea. Can you go find people to do it? It's like, great. And I felt like we were definitely doing sales at that point in time.
You had to do the alcohol thing. You were part of that?
Yeah.
Hiring for that?
Yeah.
Did that kick out all the high schoolers?
No, actually just minimized the total number of high schoolers we could actually.
But it did shrink.
Yeah. It changed the number of individuals under the age that could work, because we have small margins, which is a really important part. There's only so much staff, and there are very razor thin margins in the theater industry. But my whole point was, what are we going to have them do? People with autism, because I was such the naive guy. I'm like, I have no idea what this is going to do. And they said, we'll do anything, everything. And then they asked this question that I always, I still ask today, why not? And I'm like,
yes.
Well, okay. I can give you a lot of reasons why not in my mind, but I didn't know. Right? It's just like Andy's conjured up reasons, or let's go find facts. And so I got the president of the Autism Society, whose great idea it was for us to go hire people with autism. And I called him up and I said, okay, you're going to either help me get out of this, which I was kind of leaning towards, or get through it. And I'll be honest with you, that actually had me scared. And to be in HR and go, I'm scared of a project, it's rare. That one there, actually, my brain went to places where it's like, hey, you're going to be on every Kansas City news station at 10 o'clock because you were the guy who tried to do something well in autism space and screwed it up. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's like landmines all over the place. Anyway, we brought in some of the best minds. And, at the time, autism was such a new thing. It was a catch-all term. We brought in 13 people from around the country for 3 days of meetings. We met for breakfast, lunch, dinner, drinks, and more drinks just to try and figure out. It's like you have the family side, you have the self-advocacy side, you have the academic side, you have all these different groups who had their own value proposition. And at the end of the day, here I am as this employer going, I want to hire people that have autism. How can we make it work, right? I can't do this for charity. That was out of the window because our margins are too small. I can't hire 2 people to do one person's job. So how do we go about doing that? And the ironic thing is when we started evaluating our processes, we actually found that we were inadvertently screening out the very people we were trying to hire, whether it be through technology was timing out and people couldn't get through it fast enough, or our interview processes were not exactly asking the questions that we really wanted to have, answers to. So for instance, we were asking behavior-based interviews and behavior-based questions. Somebody come to the theater, we'd go to an office. It's probably an interior office, no windows. We sit down and ask them a battery of behavior-based questions, and there
interrogation.
Right. It was more of like, this is the right answer and this is the wrong answer. One of those questions was, if you find $20 on the floor, what would you do? Well, you and I could probably figure out what type of answer is going to get me a better chance of getting hired, but we asked 10 students at Blue Valley School District that same question. 9 of them said they put it in their pocket, which is probably the most authentic answer, right? But it's not the one that's going to get you hired. So we're like, wait a second. We got to deconstruct how we're asking questions, because really we want to know, we're going to put you through 2.5 weeks of training. We're going to show you how this is done and do it our way. Are you willing to do that? And if they're answering yes, then it's like, check the box, move forward, right? Yeah. Because it's more of like, it's not a game. I just need to know, are they willing to do the job? We also, got out of that interior box office and started walking the building. And so we actually created what we call the traveling interview. And that was allow the individual to kind of be in the space and see what type of jobs they're going to do. So the largest bathrooms are ones that have to be cleaned. Any bathroom has to be cleaned, but the big ones are usually the ones that are like, they're a disaster at times, especially after a family movie. It's like, oh my gosh,
I can only imagine.
Yeah, you walk in, you allow them to go in. I'm like, are you willing to help keep that clean? No. Okay, well, that's probably an answer that's going to probably disqualify the person. Or if they're like, yeah, okay, great, we're still moving on. The interesting part about it is we started looking at our buildings differently and the environment in which we worked. I don't know if you go to the movies and you walk up to that concession stand, everything's brightly lit and looks so good. And the popcorn, I don't know, it's like they create extra senses to actually waft out the butter smell popcorn or what have you. Being on the customer side is one thing. Being on the backside of that is a whole different ballgame, especially if I'm an individual who have sensory issues. So the floors can be sticky and they're tile, but there's also the rubber mats that you might have to stand on. That's a different feel. There's a huge temperature gradient between the ice maker and the popcorn popper. So now if that's going to have it, cause sensory issues. And all those wonderful lights that make the candy look so good to the customer are actually shining in your face. Mm. And oh, by the way, if you're working the cash register, that line of people oftentimes doesn't stop. And it's just one person after another. And the POS system was like, super complicated. And there's a lot of layers to it. And I think there was like 15 or 16 layers you had to go through to be able to ring somebody out. So we started looking at that going, okay, this isn't for everybody, but we were describing and allowing people to kind of get in that environment to where it's like they were helping kind of select or deselect themselves through the process. So our interview process had to change. We put our general managers in charge of the focus program within their building. we wanted to make sure the GMs, the leadership of the building were involved, because once the leaders are involved, it's a whole lot easier to be able to get things done versus, well, I told you so, or, the leader's not being engaged. Well, I just don't think that's really, that things don't move well in business unless the leader is like bought in.
Right.
Right. Because then you're pushing the boulder uphill versus like, there is no boulder. We're all in this together, and I'm validating the person. And so that was another way our onboarding process, was being done a little bit differently. We expanded the training period. If people needed a little bit more extra time, as long as they were making progress, we'd keep them in training a little bit longer. But yeah, so that was, all those pieces and parts had to kind of be tweaked. But we actually had our first hire after those first set of 3 days of meetings with the experts coming in. We had our first hire in 90 days. 90 days. All that stuff was changed. And it was just one of those things when you have, again, leadership involved and leadership buy-in removes so many different barriers that people, trying to get things done within the organization. So if it wasn't for, my senior vice president and our CEO to be able to help us kind of pave the way and say, do what needs to be done and change it. And so that was, we hired our first hire. It was awesome. And he was, it was not a charitable hire. It was, we were down to 5 students. We used the Blue Valley School District as kind of our partner in that. And one of the moms actually came up to me and said, what if my daughter's not the one selected? And I don't know. Maybe it was kind of a little, a bit foreshadowing for me, but it was more like, if we do this right, hopefully your daughter will actually have fewer no's as she goes through life. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay. And so it's this real weight of, if we do this right, and this is the only way we're going to do it is the right way, we could actually make some significant impact. And then, we have so many theaters. That was one thing. But we have a lot of guests and customers. And so doing it the right way is the only way we did it. And coming in the day, that our first hire crushed it. He actually was outperforming his peers on assessments. So, and then we rolled it out to theaters across the country, and everything kept proving that individuals were high performers. And we even found that there were people who were already hired by AMC who'd been with the company for years, that as we're looking at processes and removing barriers, they're coming up and saying, hey, can I do this? I haven't had a chance to do it because, they're like, well, he has special needs and this is his job. Nobody asked him if he wanted to do another job. Mm. And it was in this culture of inclusion of more of like, what barriers are there to you moving through your employment? Can we remove? And then he was becoming a cashier, and he was working behind the concession stand. He'd been working for us for years, and nobody had ever given him the opportunity. So the impact was huge, and it's called AMC Focus Program, FOCUS, Furthering Opportunities, Cultivating Untapped Strengths. And it's still on their website today. There's still a process that they use to get people through who might have barriers to employment. So, and then it wasn't just individuals with autism, it was individuals who had a lot of barriers, whether it be physical, whether it be otherwise, that could actually come in. We had people who are wheelchair users who are performing amazing work and that sort of stuff. So anyway, that's how I got into this whole space. And then I was doing that for a year and a half, still director of recruitment, but that was really my profession. It turned into my passion. And that's really how I'm still here now, 14 years later. Had my own business, started my own business, and being able to work with brands, whether it be here domestically or internationally. Some people speak English, some people do not, but they ask the same type of questions because this isn't necessarily a business issue. It is, but it's also a human issue. And people just want to know, how can I interact and how can I do better? So anyway, that's...
Why did you decide to continue on with advocating or helping companies include more people with disabilities?
Well, remember I told you this was not on my radar at all when I started AMC. Well, the backstory to that is I've been in a disciple-making program Disciples Made with Brian Phipps, and we were the first class. And we'd sit in triad. So me and two other guys would sit together once a week, and we talk about, the Bible reading and what we learned and that sort of stuff. And full transparency, I was behind. I had missed, I think, 3 or 4 days of being intentional and getting in the Word, that I was like, well, I have to be there at 5:30 in the morning, and I better set an alarm for like 3. And I remember that night when I set the alarm, I'm like, this feels so weird. I'm cramming God's Word. Okay, whatever. And so part of the reading was reading Proverbs. We read Proverbs every day, the day of the month. And it's 31st day of the month, and I was in Proverbs 31, and verse 8 actually jumped off its page, smacked me around, branded itself on my heart, where it says, speak up for those who can't speak for themselves. At the exact same time, I'm trying not to do this other project. I'm actually thinking I may need to go find another job because I really don't want to do this project. I was that fearful of it. And then suddenly that morning, God met me in my chair, and basically at that point was an invitation. It's like, I'm inviting you. Do you want to go on mission? I'm like, okay, God. I mean, it just broke me that morning. I mean, I know I was sleep deprived, but I was just broken. I'm driving to meet the other guys, and I walked in, and they're like, so how'd it go? How was your week? And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to tell you right now, this is where I'm at. God just invited me to be on mission with him like half an hour ago. And they're like, what? And I explained it to them, and they watched this evolution of all this stuff over the next 90 days of all this work at AMC and my passion. And honestly, there was a time when I just felt uncomfortable around people who were different than I was. And I didn't feel comfortable. And that morning it was like, you know what? It's not about your comfort. It's about, are you willing to go out and do things for the Lord? And I was like, okay, let's go. And that set me on that course, not only for AMC but everything after. My profession became a passion, which became missional. And I sit back and, I don't know if you go, camping or whatever, and you're up early in the morning, that lake that you might be next to, it's just like glass. And God came in this vision of this stone just skipping across the water. And every time that stone touches, it hits and then it goes on to the next stop. Mm-hmm. But the ripple effect that stone has, no matter if it's just skipping or whatever, it's just like that ripple. It's like, I want to be that stone. It's like, God, cast me wherever you want me to go. And if I can have a ripple effect, maybe it's a plunk and that's it. Okay, fine. Maybe if I can skip across the water and do this, I can do that. And I've found myself being able to skip across the water because he put me not only in the position of, being able to work with other businesses, but, I had 2 invitations from 2 different administrations at the White House to come talk about disability inclusion. I got invited by the U.S. Embassy to go deliver 3 keynote presentations in Moscow. And I'm like, I'm just a guy from Kansas who didn't want to do this at all. But when God sat there and said, do you want to go on mission? It wasn't more like, hey, you go on mission and I'll just hang out. It was more like, I'll go with you and I'm going to prepare the way. And so I can't, today I still can't even, this is 15 years later, to be able to sit back and people are like, you just have so much passion. I'm like, every time I talk about it, it's like, I'll go on forever. I mean, I love the fact that, things have time limits, because I'm like, I can go on, because this isn't about Andy. This is about us looking at individuals that God looks upon, and how do we look at them through his eyes? Mm-hmm. Because we change the lens in which we look at people. Yes. Don't look at them through a pity. And look at the individuals with disabilities. If you look at the Bible, how often was Jesus hanging out with individuals who had challenges or barriers? Mm-hmm. All the time? And it's like, so anyway, he kind of changed my heart that morning, and just really gave me a heart for helping businesses really unlock the potential of their employees and their business as well.
You mentioned earlier that you were fearful of them. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that was?
Lack of knowledge and understanding.
Yeah.
There's actually a statistic out there. It says 60% of the people in the United States actually wants to engage individuals with disabilities, but they don't know how. So what do? Nothing.
Right.
And that's a choice. Or I could choose to get engaged and understand that they're people. They have personalities. They have likes. They have loves. They have hates. They have things they like to do, things that, they don't like to do. I mean, so it's more of you get to make a choice. You can choose not to do or choose to do. And that was, to me, was more of my choice of like, let's get involved, let's get engaged, that sort of stuff. So, I mean, people with disabilities, they just changed my world. So,
yeah, when I've been teaching since I was 15, so it's been many years of teaching kids. And every time I'd come across a child with special needs, I felt very similar fear. Really, I don't know what that the child's going to do. I don't know how to handle it. Is he going to try to bite me or something? Right? All these made up, idiotic assumptions. But then I also remember there were a couple of students I taught for years, and I would dread it every time. And I would also look at the parent and feel such sorrow and sympathy for them. And I would be thinking, there's no way I could handle having a child with special needs. If I had one, my whole world would be done. My life would be done. That would be the end of my life.
yeah.
Fast forward to 11 years ago, I have one now.
Yeah.
And it's been one of the biggest blessings I've ever received from God. But and before that, it was all, I don't want it.
Yeah.
And it's fear. But it just proves we don't know what we need. Only God knows what we need based on his providential will and plan.
Well, I think it's interesting because, in my life, in my career, not even my career, much as my life, right? So at the age of 19, I was diagnosed with significant migraines. I mean, there were times where I would actually have migraines for days and weeks. So then I start collecting my own punch list of things that I actually had. I'm 51, and I don't know, less than a year ago, I was diagnosed with ADHD. And I'm like, my entire life made a lot more sense now because I now understand more about me. My son has ADHD, and he was diagnosed at an early age, and just trying to get him through school was no small feat. My daughter has a significant hearing impairment because of the fact that we had tubes and ear infections and that sort of stuff. But, at the end of the day, she had to have a procedure that, significant hearing loss in her left ear. Ironically, she went on to dance and sing and has a voice like an angel. So yeah, it's just kind of like, if you sit back and you go, okay, disabilities is not me, that's not my world. It doesn't take long for suddenly to become your world. And it's like, I'm with you. It's like my son and how he thought, and, don't ask Gabe to read a book. Forget about it. It's just not going to happen. But it's the same thing I actually struggled with as a kid.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, I could read that same page 4 times and still not have any idea what's on it. But, it was also helping him get through school and helping, Kyla get through what she was going through. And, but so, yeah, there's just these things. And then I have a massive heart attack 6 years ago. And anyway, disability is part of life. It's not something you can block out. And I think that's once you understand that that's a part of life, and how do we embrace it? Some of my fondest people are individuals who have challenges. And I'm with you. It's kind of like, didn't think it ever happened to me. Well, I have my own stuff, and people around me have stuff. And it's okay.
Here's the news. We all have a disability, and it started with Adam. We are born into disability. And we all have something. That's something I've really come to realize is everybody has something that they have to deal with.
Yeah.
Some sort of mental, psychological, physical disability. And I do think that a company can become wiser when they first get to know their employees a little bit better, and they start to understand what are their strengths and weaknesses. And specifically, for example, if your son was asked to read a book, is that the only way to consume the book?
Right.
Can you maybe listen to it? Mm-hmm. Maybe do you want paper, or do you want digital, or do you want audio? But let's not lose sight of what we're trying to do here, which is transfer the knowledge or the information of that book into your son's brain.
Right.
Don't just do this one way only and miss sight of the bigger picture, which is get him to know what is in the book. And the other part of that maybe is, hey, let's sit down and we'll just discuss it together. Mm-hmm. We'll read it together.
Yep.
But just adapting, especially when you have, I can only imagine how hard of a worker your son is, a hard worker on your team who just needs a little bit of adjustment to keep him going as a star.
Yeah. I think businesses go through a lot of resources to recruit. And so we do all these interviews and we do all these assessments, and suddenly everything's going well. It's like you fit, you match our profile. But then they get into the onboarding, and then suddenly within a few weeks, this person no longer fits. Like, we missed it. I mean, were we really that bad at recruiting, or are we actually presenting information in a way that they can't absolutely absorb it?
Right.
So how do we do our training? Our training need to be different. You know, I had one organization that I worked with. They had a mechanic that they hired, and this mechanic blew every aptitude test out of the water because he was actually one of the primary mechanics who actually kept Apache helicopters flying in the desert. And I can only imagine all the nuances of a helicopter and sand. There's kind of you better be really good at it. But anyway, he couldn't remember. He suffered a traumatic brain injury when he was in the service. And he came out, and his brain, just the way it rewired itself and healed itself, he couldn't remember simple steps, like 1 through 5. So they tried to have him start up his machine, and he couldn't remember just to start. He could take that machine apart, he could put it back together, but the startup process, this series of things he had to do to get the machine started, he just couldn't process it. So the manager went home. His manager went home that night, and actually, she had a high school student who had 3x5 note cards and actually wrote step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the note cards. Put a hole in it, put it in one of those little cheap rings, and hung it on his machine. When he got there the next morning, he was able to start up his machine.
How much time and effort did that take her?
Right.
10 minutes?
And how much did it cost?
Right. Nothing.
Right.
What is the return on investment?
The ironic part about it, the ironic part is that they actually realized that other people were saying, wait a second, why don't we put the startup and lockout, tag out processes on all of our machines that way? So they started this narrative, and then somebody said, let's take pictures. So they married the narrative with the pictures, and they found out that their onboarding dropped. The amount of time it took to onboard new employees dropped like a rock, and people were able to cross-train much more efficiently because of the fact that you had all that stuff already there. That, again, it's a subtle tweak, but what might be good for one person may be good for a whole lot of people.
Right.
So
I love that. Let's get to the most important question, which is how did Christ find you?
Part of me is almost kind of like God said, "You'll be back." I mean, so as a kid. I grew up in a Christian home. We lived 2 blocks away from our church, Episcopal Church, in small town, Abilene, Kansas, and literally walked to church every day. But my brother and I were the only kids in the church. And so we were the acolytes or the altar boys every service, every Sunday. And so we'd do that. But to me, that was just more of obedience and just doing, and that was my whole thing about God was we didn't have a Sunday school, we didn't have a youth group or whatever. It's just like, okay, I'm honoring God. It's by doing. So, okay, if I can just do, I'll be fine. And so anyway, fast forward, parents made a move when I was in high school. I didn't really get connected with the church up there. They moved to Buffalo, New York. So Abilene, Kansas to Buffalo, New York was certainly a shift.
Big move.
Yeah. Graduated high school up there and then came back to Kansas State University and felt like I had to get back on. I thought Jesus pretty much resided on the western side of the Mississippi and not the eastern side of the Mississippi. But just a place I was very comfortable. And so I came back wasn't involved in church at all in college at all. It wasn't until, I graduated and I was a third grade teacher, and one day this lady walked in the dining hall, and I turned and did a double take, and my corn that was sitting on my tray actually fell off and hit the floor. Every teacher that was in there knew what happened. Every kid thought it was really funny that Mr. Traub dropped his corn. Anyway, that was the day that God sent his angel, who became my wife. So Kim really kind of steered me back towards God. I mean, she's like, look, if we're ever going to have a future together, this is a major part of my life. You need to be going to church. You need to have a relationship with the Lord. And once I did, it's like, if you can do that, then we'll continue to think about maybe there's a future down for us. But she made it very clear that was part of it. I remember there were times, Bronson, I mean, Sunday mornings, she'd show up at my apartment and she would be dressed to the nines. She's ready to go to church. I would send that poor lady away in tears because I would be so I'm done with organized religion, blah, 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 blah. The fact that she stuck with me, I mean, that's why I say she's like an angel, because, I mean, she had no quit. And she got me back into church and got me, she pointed me in the direction. God then just said, welcome back.
How long did that take? How long?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. I mean, we had our first date and I proposed in 9 months. So it was a short period of time. It was, I don't know. I mean, to her, it must have felt like eternity, because what I put her through, what I put her through on those days, I can only imagine. I mean, because I know how nasty I can be, and I think I probably went full on because I didn't realize part of me, it's not just me. We're fighting spiritual battles all the time.
Sure.
And I just, I was letting one side take over when the Lord just sat there and said, "You'll come back." And so I did. And once I did that, it was all in and understanding the relationship. And it wasn't about the doing. It was just about just being, letting him be a part of, be the light in your life and steering you. And then certainly all this, since our time, being married and all these other things and my career and everything else, I mean, it's just like Lord shows up. And so it wasn't more of like, well, is God there on Sundays? It was like, no, he's actually there in my work. He's there at my home. He's there when I'm working out. He's there on my runs. He's there when I'm sleeping. I mean, so this whole relationship, honestly, it was since I was out of college where I really just I found what I believe he wants, which is the relationship with us. And but it was Kim who was the catalyst for that. And I certainly will always be eternally grateful for her not giving up on me.
Was there a moment that you can remember where it just flipped?
I don't know about being flipped. I can remember when I actually, in Episcopal Church, the infant baptism is the thing. And when I chose to be baptized as an adult and going through that, I remember going under and coming back, and people are like, death to yourself and, being raised anew. I seriously actually felt a complete change that went to my core. When coming back out, it was almost like a whole lot of stuff got washed off. I mean, I would not want to be in that water again just because just the stuff, right? I mean, just the things, and be able to sit there and go, okay, this is my public declaration of my relationship and love for the Lord and for Jesus Christ. And to be able to do that publicly, but it felt like nobody else was in the room. That was just me and God. And it's just almost like walking through a transition and transformation. So,
but you had to make that decision to get in the attire and get dunked.
Yeah.
So what led up to that? Was it just to please your
No, it was not. Actually, it was just more of understanding that the Bible is not a historical document. It's a living document. I'm sitting there going, wait a second, these are things. And yes, I understand there's the Old Testament, and that does, the history helps us understand the future and current state, but it was just understanding that those red letters are real. They're real today. I mean, my first Bible was, that was mine, right? That I owned was a red letter Bible. And I got to tell you, there's the gold edges on a lot of the Bibles. I was wearing it off because it was just like that. It fed me. It was just like I was so starved for knowledge and the love of what he wanted to show me. It was like I just couldn't get enough. It was like, let's keep going. And so I don't know if there was a day or a moment, but I will tell you that all I felt was at that point in time was like I was being fed with some type of nourishment that I'd never been fed before. And quite frankly, pleasing Kim was probably the catalyst, but understanding the love the Lord's got for me and then be able to pass that down. And, in our marriage, been married 25 years now, which is super. I mean, I'm like, oh my gosh, she's got a lot of fortitude to be married to me for 25 years. But then to sit back and watch the kids, right? I mean, you are judged by your kids, and watching how the kids just kind of grow up and Gabe, my son, and the love he has, and just being a strong man in the Lord and what he's doing, and my daughter, who she is, and she's starting a ministry to minister to girls who are transitioned from high school into whatever their next chapter is of their life. And I'm just like, man, Lord, I sit back and I look back, I can't even remember, I couldn't even fathom who I was prior to that, because I probably wouldn't even recognize myself.
How are you integrating your faith today in your work?
No, first of all, when you sit there and you have an invitation from the Lord, and this all starts this catalyst, you can't really, not have him part of it. But there's the bathing the business in prayer. But then there's always this whole thing about, significant steps we're always praying about, right? I mean, I've even asked, people, it's like, hey, I got this opportunity. Can you be praying for it? I mean, it's not like go to the, business, textbooks and go, this is something I should be doing next. It's like, no, I need to pray about it. And we're actually in a pivot right now that we're praying a lot about, just because Kim is certainly a major part of the business, and she always has been. The kids, since I was, they were really young when I was like, here's what's going on. So I've had the business for about 15 years, and they're 20 and 19. So most of their life. But then I also have business partners who are also believers. And that's really, I got to tell you, is part of one of my questions when people want to partner with me is like, what's your testimony? How's the Lord working in your life? And being able to have people who are like-minded, because we're not going to do this push and pull thing. It's like we're all pushing same direction. And if there's an issue that we need to deal with, we're going to be on our knees to deal with it. And that's one of the pivots. I mean, there's some things we'll say we can do, but is it what we are supposed to be doing? And we're having those discussions literally right now, and being at peace with it. And so that's how I integrate, the Lord in my life. I people that I know, I'll send out, hey, this is what the Lord's laying on my heart today, or hey, I've heard this piece of scripture. And, some people that are involved with Traub Associates are people who are like-minded, and that you're forming an army. I mean, I think there's spiritual warfare all the time, right? And so if I'm going to lock arms with people, I'm just going to make sure that they are people who have the right motivation and that their eyes are to the Lord. And we all stumble. There's going to be days where it's like they will call me out and say, have you prayed about this? Or is this just Andy having an idea? Yeah, okay. Well, we need to pray about it. And so there's that. It's being associated with business members and business people who are praying. I can't imagine life right now without prayer. I can't imagine not being able to that communication right with the Lord and sitting there and saying, you know what? This is yours. You got me here. He can take me out too. I mean, I know that. And then so how do I do things the right way, honor him in everything that I do? And if I'm honoring him, everything else is going to take care of itself. Yes. And working with people, and certainly providing opportunities, that ripple effect. I don't know every opportunity that I possibly may have some hand in helping provide people. That's not up to me. My job is just to go be passionate. 15 years into this thing and still have the same passion for removing barriers for employment, that individuals can actually sit back and say, you know what, this is who I am and this is what I want to do. And they get a second chapter on life. And so let's go. I mean, so anyway, every morning it's almost like I can feel like I can take the hill because I got an army of people with me. I got the Lord in front of me. Let's go. So
you wake up excited to tackle the day.
I do, because I have no idea. I mean, Bronson, people are like, what's your business plan? And I feel really bad because I can honestly say, I don't know. The Lord's in charge, and He has put me in crazy spaces. I mean, first of all, to do it, I mean, a lot of small businesses fail early.
Yes.
And if you have a runway that you're able to get through that, you're just like, okay, what's my driving force? I want to do well, but I want to do well by the Lord because He's got me in this spot. And so everything I can do is honor Him. To me, it's almost like a cheat code. So
I love that. You've worked with some big companies, right? Mm-hmm. A couple of them are who?
I've worked with Amazon. I worked with Starbucks. I've worked with Kroger Foods. I've worked with Google in the past. Mm-hmm. So some small companies.
Yeah, kind of big. If anybody's interested in learning more about what you do and your services and maybe even engaging, where could they go to find more information? Yeah,
so we have our website. It's Traub, Traub as in boy, ASSOC.com, or Andy T at TraubAssociates.com. Feel free to email me or what have you. But yeah, our website, LinkedIn, we're on LinkedIn as well, whether it be my own personal page or our company page, Traub Associates, LLC. Ironically, there's a lot of family members up in Chicago area who have Traub, and they're also consultants. So it's Traub Associates Consulting, LLC. And so, yeah, anytime, they can reach out however they want to with email or go to the website, and they can find us that way too.
As always, we'll add the links to our website. Mr. Traub, I am so grateful for you leading the charge on really building a future for my son. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.